Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. Today, we dive deeper into leadership in the skilled trades with a special guest, Nanette Miner of The Training Doctor. Nanette is a succession advisor and leadership development consultant for the AEC industries. That's architectural, engineering, and construction industries. Nanette started off consulting for Fortune 100 companies and eventually found her niche in the ACE industries because she saw a void that needed to be filled. After recognizing the baby boomer owners and CEOs were going to be retiring from these industries by 2030 with no succession strategies in place, she quickly pivoted to help these blue-collar business owners develop leaders from within. Grab a pen and paper for this one, guys. You're not going to want to miss it because Nanette is a wealth of knowledge and she's willing to share that with the Blue is the New White audience. She also has a free book on leadership that you can find at leadershipfromdayone.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and on our website at blueisthenewwhite.com to receive all the latest updates. You can now find this podcast on iHeartRadio, SiriusXM, and Pandora. As always, we rely on word of mouth from our listeners to further the mission. So if you enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to rate it, review it, and share it with your friends. The future generations of tradespeople depend on it. They depend on you. So thank you again and enjoy this episode of Blue is the New White with Nanette Miner. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. I am super excited about my guest here today. We were introduced by one of my former guests, recent former guest, Mr. Neil Thompson. So if you haven't caught that episode, definitely check it out. That guy is a wealth of knowledge and a really, really big advocate for the skilled trades and all the things that we talked to. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, definitely go back, take a listen. But today we have Nanette Miner with us. Nanette, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have these conversations too. Nanette and I were just talking before I hit the record button about how lately we have been getting a lot of leadership opinions and information on this show with regard to the skilled trades, the blue-collar industries, and she is going to talk a little bit about that today. But before we get into that, I'd like to kind of get to know you a little bit more. For those who don't know you, who are listening, can you kind of just explain what you do, who you are, and how you got to where you are?
Okay, I'll start at the end and then I'll say how we got here. So I work with mostly AEC, architecture, engineering, construction firms, between 100 and 400 employees, and I help them with their succession planning and developing their leadership pipeline from within. How I got here was I've been self-employed for 32 years. I've been a consultant working with mostly, until the last few years, mostly Fortune 100 companies, doing professional development plans for them and leadership development. And in 2015, when the US Census came out and they said that all the boomers were going to be gone by 2030, I thought, that's only 15 years. And what I've seen inside of these big companies is that they're not doing leadership development well. And 15 years isn't really a lot of time to turn that ship around, because leadership's not a skill, even though we keep saying it is, it's a behavior. And you can't teach a behavior in a 2-hour or a 4-hour class. It's more of a mindset. It's more of an approach. It's more of the way that you think about things. So in 2015, I said my last act in my consulting, because you probably know when you're self-employed, you pivot numbers of times depending on the economy or what is essential at this time. I realized this is going to be my last pivot. This is going to be what I do for the rest of my career, is help companies with their leadership development, because what I kept observing was they either waited until they promoted somebody to a leadership role and then said, okay, now we want you to change your behavior. Like, we didn't train you to be a leader up until this point. We promoted you based on your technical capabilities, but that's not what a leader does. So now we got to train you how to be a leader too. And I just thought that's really unfair to ask somebody to take on functional responsibilities and then also change their behavior at the same time. And behavior change is a hard thing to do. So, and also we don't evaluate people on their behavior or on their leadership capabilities, right? So even if you became a fabulous leader, which you weren't originally, but assuming you became a great one, why put in the time and the effort to become a great one, because you're not getting evaluated on that. Anyway, so in these big companies, what I kept observing was they would promote you first and then teach you to be a leader, which was too little, too late, in my opinion. Or they would have what they call HIPO programs, high potential programs, where they would pick and choose who they thought was going to be a future leader and then put all their time and energy and money into those few people. So I worked with a huge organization that had like 15 or 17,000 employees. And every year we put 300 people through this program that, eventually in 10 years, we expected them to be a leader. And my analogy that I always use is Tom Brady versus Johnny Manziel. And we have a Heisman Trophy winner who flamed out in his first year in the NFL. And then we have Tom Brady, who was the 199th draft pick. Like nobody had any aspirations for him, right? And how did it play out in the end? So I just feel like picking and choosing a young person early in their career is ludicrous. You just don't know what their interests are. They don't know what their interests are. They don't know what they aspire to be. So my philosophy, if you can see it on my banner back here, is leadership from day one. Yeah, let's just develop everybody's leadership capabilities the minute they walk in the door, because you cannot tell me that's not going to help your company, right? If everybody's a better communicator, everybody's a better problem solver, everybody works more collaboratively, like why would we reserve those skills that we call leadership skills? Why would we reserve those for people? Let's just give everybody those skills. And then if people aspire to leadership, if it turns out that they like it, they enjoy it, then great, they aspire to leadership. But meanwhile, you've raised the capabilities of your whole organization. So how did I come to AEC? Was one of my first clients was a 400-person construction management firm. And I said to myself, these are my people. The Fortune 100 people are not my people anymore. These are my people, primarily because the majority of companies in that arena are still owner founders. Yeah. And they're all boomers and they would like to retire or sell. And either one of those scenarios requires you to have a leadership team in place. And most of them don't. Most of them have everything up here.
Wow. That's a lot. I got a couple. Yep. I got a couple of questions for you, because some of the things that you said are really interesting. So you said you had worked with a company, 15 to 17,000 employees. They picked 300 every year yeah. to put through this leadership program. I'm curious, and if this translates across other organizations as well, but how do you choose the 300 people out of the 17,000? Were there certain criteria that they were looking for that they deemed leadership material, or?
Generally, what I know from the literature and how those programs are run, they choose people right out of college. Who look like viable candidates, and then they'll put them in a 3-year or 4-year rotational program with a lot of training and a lot of, move to this department, move to that department. You'll have like 6 assignments.
Okay.
And then hopefully nobody poaches you.
Yeah, of course.
That's my other argument.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so your analogy with Manziel and with Tom Brady is really spot on.
Thank you.
Okay, that's really great. Okay, so I'm curious what led you to the blue collar space? What led you to the architectural engineering and construction space?
Based on one of those first companies that I worked with, and what's funny is, I had worked for them back in 2005 on a different project. And then they came to me, the owner, well, not the owner, sorry, the new CEO heard me on a podcast as he was driving home. And he was like, oh my gosh, I know her. And he called me and he said, I just became CEO. We've done no succession planning at our C-level, other than the fact that myself and the new COO just got promoted from within. But he's like, I am the new CEO and I've got to get on this because I have a 9-person board and I know that 5 of them are leaving in the next 5 years. So I started with them, and then I just realized I just like this industry. They're plain speaking, let's get to the point. There's no politics. I like how fast it moves, and I like, I choose companies that are between 100 and 400 because I want to talk to the CEO. If that person doesn't buy in and doesn't have the urgency, I can't make anybody else have it either. It has to come from them.
How often do you see the buy-in not there from executive management?
Well, I've never, because they come to me when they are motivated, right? But the reason I keep the employee base so low is because once you get over like 400, then I get they try to push me down to HR, and HR can't make it happen without CEO owning it. And so HR does execute, but HR can't be the champions of it. So if I can't have direct access to the champion, then I can't do my work.
Okay. Well, I'm a big advocate for these industries needing this leadership development. And I think that you have a very unique approach by saying that to develop everyone, right? I really, really like that. And it's not a perspective that I've heard before. I've heard the, promote to leadership, then train them. I've heard the select people that could be leadership material. Sometimes it's based on certain criteria, sometimes just college graduates, whatever. But this develop everyone, I'm really curious about that, because I'm very intrigued. Just to kind of tell a little story here. So just recently we went through a shift in my organization where we have eliminated a service manager position and elevated our technicians to lead technicians, right? So the theory behind it is more leaders with smaller crews instead of one leader with bigger crews. Right. Yeah. And so I did, admittedly, right, we elevated to this position and then did the leadership training, right, which was great. But this is what I noticed is that when we put our lead technicians through this leadership training, they were craving it well before they even, were given this position. But it became really clear to me instantly that this was a void, because I can only speak for my industry. I don't know about the construction space, but it would seem like there's a lot of technical training. There's a lot of management training. There's a lot of
certifications.
Right. Yeah. Certifications, very little from a leadership perspective. Is that also what you see?
Yeah, absolutely. Because in those areas, in those trades, you get promoted based on how many initials you have after your name.
Yeah, no, that is that's really
so. I'll throw something back at you. Please. So now that you have these new lead technicians, how are you evaluating them? Are they evaluated on retention? Are they evaluated on promotion within? Are they evaluated on? Do you do a 360-degree assessment and see if their employees like to work for them, or are they still getting evaluated on the technical?
TBD.
Number of service calls. Yeah, exactly.
And that's really, and I think, I'm going to be very transparent about this, because I think that a lot of my listeners are probably in the same boat, right? Yes. And I think that it's so common in the industry that people need to hear the other side of it. So let's use me as an example, Nanette. I just kind of gave you a glimpse into, what I was doing, and I'm typical, right? I was a technician. Before I became CEO of this business, I was a tech. I worked my way up the ranks, and now I'm here. No leadership training. I read a lot of books. That's about it. But there are so many people in my shoes. So for me, I mean, what advice, just off the bat, this is a very small sample size of information I just gave you, so I realize that. But what's going through your head right now in regards to what I just told you in my organization? How would you coach somebody through that?
Through what?
Through the leadership. You just challenged me with a few questions, right? And I couldn't answer. TBD was my answer, verbatim, right? So what would you challenge me with? How would you say, why is that important? And why should I be doing that in my organization?
Oh, well, because no one's going to do what they're not evaluated on. What's the in the training industry, there's a, it's such a famous phrase. Why can't I remember it? But basically you get what you measure. So if you're measuring people on their physical outputs, whatever that is, service calls, customer service rankings, whatever, but you're not evaluating them on internal. Like, one of the biggest problems in all industries is recruitment and retention. And I'm like, that's because you haven't given people an idea that there's a career here, right? Like, one of the things that I recommend to my clients is you need to have career paths. When you recruit somebody new into your company, they want to know where it's going. They don't want a job. They want a career. So if you say to them, look, we're going to put this kind of development into you, and in 3 years or 5 years, you could be here or you could be here. That's another thing that companies do poorly. They don't do lateral moves. They don't do internal moves in the organization. It's just happened this way for so many years, and it's totally the fault of the way companies have been organized. They're in silos and everybody goes up. So if there's nowhere to go up, then I leave, right? Why can't you say, hey, your customer service skills could also make you a great service technician. That could also make you a good salesperson. We would like you to explore 2 or 3 different careers here. We'll give you 6 months in another department. See if you like it. Like, why are we not utilizing people's skills that we already built in them in other areas of the business rather than them going, well, if I want to get anywhere, I got to go somewhere else, right? And I got to take a promotion or just take another job somewhere else so I can learn more and so I can say that I advanced. We're just not using lateral moves. So one of the things I tell clients is you have to have a career path. If you go to these recruiting events, which a lot of people in AEC do, that's how they get their new hires. They go to colleges during March, April, May, and they do recruiting events. You need to have a picture or a diagram or something that says, when you come in as a junior, whatever, in 2 years, we'll see that you'll be a certified whatever, and then you'll be a senior whatever, and then we can make you an assistant project manager. And people want to see that you're going to develop them and also where this career could lead. And Gen Z is all about that. They will challenge you. Like, where do I go? What else is this company offering me? Gen Z is all about security and financial security, job security and financial security, because they saw their parents get screwed over so much.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. How difficult is the buy-in for something like this, right? I mean, as far as, and when I say buy-in, right, I'm really asking execution-wise. It's great to have a career path, but that's step 1. Step 2 is you got to stick to it, right? So I would imagine with a career path, you have to have different levels, and then you have to have within those levels what it takes to succeed, what it takes to advance, and then actually have somebody to oversee that. My guess is the leaders that you're developing, right? And see it through. Otherwise, you're just making empty promises. So how difficult is this for some companies to be able to, 1, wrap their head around, and 2, execute on?
So it's not difficult to wrap their head around only because of the way that I package it, I would say.
Okay.
So I start every client with a 2-day workshop. It's called a succession sprint. And all the senior leaders and I are locked in a room together for 2 days. And we look at who's currently in the pipeline, which is generally hardly anyone, and then who potentially could be in the pipeline. And then where do we have gaps? And if you have gaps, you need to go find them somewhere else. And that's a problem I see coming down the pike that companies aren't prepared for. Is I was just on LinkedIn a few weeks ago and somebody's like, yay, pay transparency is a law now, and that's going to help the employees. And I said, yes, it's not going to help the employers, because if all that the employees look at is money and the bigger companies are offering more, all the smaller companies are going to suffer. So, and since 99% of companies in America are small to mid-sized companies, I see a problem coming very, very soon. Back to my point. So we lock everyone in a room. We figure out what the pipeline is and what the developmental needs are. We start there. Just let's get everybody at a common level of capability in the organization. Those who we think will be leaders in 3 or 5 years. What development do they specifically need? That could be enrolling them in a program. That could be getting them a one-on-one coach because maybe they just need one, laser focus on something. A lot of people don't know that your local university or community or technical college has a department called the Workforce Development Department. Every university is concerned with supporting their community. One of their missions is to prepare students who will stay in the community, not graduate and leave. So they want to know what you all need in the community, and they will custom design training for you, and they will bring it to you. I used to teach college in Connecticut, where I was raised, and the university that I worked for would send me into companies to do training, to do coursework, not training. I mean, it was a regular 16-week curriculum, but they would send the instructor to the company because the company requested it. So that's an opportunity too. So what my philosophy is, especially with smaller companies, you don't need a training department because you couldn't possibly have one person in charge of training who would know everything that needed to be done, right? So my expertise is the 30 plus years that I've spent in this space. I know who the players are. I know what is out there. And especially when it comes to leadership development, it's all out there. There's nothing new that we're inventing. What you need me to tell you is, where do you find it? Do you find it at your local university? Do you hire a consultant? Do you, go to Center for Creative Leadership? how many people? If you're going to send 8 people, let's do a program. If you're going to send 1 person, let's get them a coach. So that's what my 2 days of fact finding is what does this company particularly need to up level their leadership pipeline? And then I come back to them with a report that they can implement. So implementing at that level is not so hard. I do suggest that you probably want a training coordinator of some kind so that you know that people are staying on their developmental paths, so that you have somebody who's in charge of paying the tuition if there's tuition, or tuition reimbursement. There's got to be somebody in charge of that. HR is not generally that person. HR is more about compliance and benefits, and that's not their forte. And it shouldn't certainly be the CEO either. It shouldn't be a C-level person either. So you probably do want to hire somebody at some point to coordinate that and stay on top of it. Again, with the career paths as well. I think that could be like a fractional executive who comes in once or twice a week and says, all right, let's just take a lay of the land again and see if everybody's on track and maybe who's not.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you put that very well. I appreciate that. I think my listeners are going to be able to glean a lot of insight just from that particular answer. So my next question on this is, I'm curious what you see as the goals of this leadership development that you're from the eyes of the employer, right? Why would an employer hire you? I imagine the ROI is it's hard to quantify. Is that a
no
fair
and
statement?
It's immediate. It's not hard to quantify, and it's immediate. The goal for me is that you don't go out of business, because if you don't have a leadership pipeline, you are forced to hire from without. And as I already said, that's going to become more and more expensive. Smaller companies are not going to have the money to compete with the bigger companies. And at a certain level, that's all that employees look at is it's like when teenagers leave their first job because they're going to get 25 cents more in another job, and you're like, that's ludicrous. Why would you change jobs for that? But to them, it looks like this is an improvement. So I don't want you to go out of business because you can't find people to work in your business. So, and also to lead it. And especially, like I said, with the niche that I've chosen, those folks want to retire.
Yeah.
Or they're just going to have to, close the doors, and they don't want to do that either, because they've spent 30 years building something incredible and they don't want it to just fritter away.
Yeah.
My dad is that perfect example. My dad was self-employed. I think that's why I've been self-employed, because I saw that as my model. But at the end of the day, there was nobody in our family to take over his business, and he just, that was it. He retired, and that was the end of the business. And I don't want that to happen to others.
Do you work with a lot of family-owned businesses? Is this something that you... No,
I try not to.
Oh, you try?
Because I'm not a therapist.
That's smart.
I don't have those skills whatsoever. I don't want to be in those arguments. No.
Okay. No, hey, you know what? And that's fair. And I only ask because I know that this industry is riddled with family-owned businesses, and so, I know of quite a few of my listeners that have family-owned businesses, but I completely understand your mindset on that. I think you're very smart.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Wow. This is, I'm sorry. I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this. It's so much information. What am I not asking?
Wow. That's a good question. I would say what you're not asking is, where do I start?
Yeah. Good one.
So I will reach over here to this booklet that I wrote a couple of years ago. It's called Leadership from Day One, 25 Activities to Develop Leadership Skills in Your Employees. I really believe that with just this booklet, you can start up-leveling the capabilities of your employees with no training, with no formal anything. These are scripted conversations that start developing leadership capabilities in the jobs and the roles that people already have, but you're going to give them special assignments. You're not going to send them out to training classes because A, that's a one-off. B, that is a contrived situation, right? I designed training for years. I know it's going to work in the classroom situation because I designed it to work that way. But I want people to learn in the real world, because if you're in a problem situation or critical thinking situation, you can't just stop and go, well, that's not how I learned it, so I don't know what to do, right? I need you to be able to think more expansively. So what these are conversations that are scripted out, as I said, let's say you just want somebody to learn more about your competitors. Like there's so many salespeople in roles who only know what they sell and they don't know what their competitors sell or what their advantages are over the others. And so, that's objection number one is, well, why should I do business with you when I can get it from Joe for, something cheaper? Or isn't this the exact same thing as what Joe sells? And they go, oh, I don't know. That's the end of the conversation. So here's an assignment where you can say, I want you to do this competitive analysis. I want you to bring back these 3 things. I'm going to give you a week to do it. And then we're going to discuss what you learned. There's all sorts of conversations like that. And then at the bottom of every conversation, I say, here's what you're developing, thinking skills, writing skills, team building skills, whatever the different assignments are. That's number 1. Number 2, I would say, the biggest thing that I hear over and over again from CEOs or C-level people in the construction industry is there's no one who is capable of being promoted because nobody knows enough about the industry. To which I reply, that's on you because you've had them for this many years. And how come you haven't developed them? So number 2, the second thing I would do is start educating your employees about the industry that you're in and the business that you're in, because so few people know anything other than their job. And I think that's why they can't see expansively about the future of their organization as well, right? They don't know how the business runs. They don't know where you fit in the industry or how you're contributing to the industry. So every professional association's number 1 mission is educating their membership. There's so much education available from your professional association. And it's one of the things I do when I give a report back to my clients is I start with their professional association and go, look, you could get all of this for a nominal amount of money if you just enroll people in what your organization is, your professional association is already offering. But what I recommend is you as the CEO or head of HR or whatever, start taking your trade magazines or see what you see in the public realm. Like I subscribe to Engineering News Record. I'm not an engineer in the least, but I learned so much about the construction industry by understanding what they're all paying attention to. Start sending an article a week out that says, this just appeared in our trade association magazine. I want to have a discussion about this next week. Here are 3 questions I want you to contemplate. And, we're going to come and discuss those. And that's kind of the critical part. And it's the same thing that's critical about this is after you give the assignment, you have to do the debrief. Yeah. That's when people start thinking about, or that's when they ask the questions, right? So send the article on like Tuesday and say on Friday afternoon, we're going to quit at 3:30 and we're going to have a 1-hour discussion before we wrap up about what y'all think about this article and where do we fit in the industry? Because I just encounter so many young people, and I'll even include people in their 40s who just do not understand the business that they are in and the industry that they're in.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Even that little tidbit of information, being able to send out 1 article per week, I think is incredibly valuable. So that's great. Thank you for that. I do have one question as I'm listening to you, and it's fantastic. And it's right up my alley, right? I'm a big leadership guy. I love it. I'm only been learning it really heavily for the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm still in my infancy, but I do what I can. Anyway, I'm wondering how often you come across people that say they want to be a leader, but exhibit characteristics and qualities that counteract and contradict that statement. You understand what I mean by that?
I do, and I don't encounter those folks that often, only because that's not who I am dealing with.
Okay.
But it's also the reason why you want to start leadership from day one, because you want to build that culture of this is how we speak to one another. This is how we give feedback to one another. This is how we solve problems. This is how we analyze how problems occurred. One of the things I suggest a lot is after action reviews. I mean, if something blows up, let's figure out why it blew up so that we don't ever do that again. And companies don't do that. They want to assign blame, or they just want to bury it under the rug like that was a one-off. Probably wasn't a one-off. There's probably some underlying misunderstanding of something. I actually got that idea. Well, I mean, after action reviews are a military thing, but I saw as a speaker at a conference once, a former commander of the Blue Angels. And he said, after every performance, before we go out and meet the public, we get around a conference table and we say what we did wrong in that performance, even though none of us died, although recently someone did, right? And what we'll do better next time. Like, I was second behind, it's because whatever, right? They all have to admit to doing something wrong during that performance and what they're going to commit to fix it. And I thought, when you do it regularly, this is just standard operating procedure. It's not a big deal. It's not assigning blame. It's just, this is how we get better all the time.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because you started off this podcast with a football reference, and just a couple of weeks ago in my leadership team, I used a similar football reference, and I said, listen, we're really good at pivoting when we make a mistake, right? When we make a mistake, we get the pieces picked up, we get it cleaned up, and we make that mistake right. What we are terrible at is looking at the film, right? The next day, we aren't great at sitting down and saying, okay, why did this play not work? So that's my challenge for my leadership team, over the next few weeks is, when we do falter, when we do trip and fall, we do that, from time to time.
Yeah.
Are we asking ourselves why, and are we dissecting it to the point where we understand as a team what we did wrong? So that's kind of the association that I made when you said that. So trying to paint it in a couple of different ways for my listeners there, but very very powerful.
Jack Welch, who was the former CEO of GE, and everybody said he was the management guru or whatever. Early in his career, when he was a chemist in Massachusetts, he blew up a building that belonged to GE. And he got called into his boss's office, and he thought he was going to get fired. And the boss said, how did that happen? What did you learn from it? And now you know what not to do. And that kind of became his management mantra as well.
Now I know what not to do. Well, yeah, hopefully you don't have to blow up a building to get to that point. But hey, sometimes.
Right. But he was like, I was so grateful that I didn't get fired for my mistake.
Oh, absolutely. Wow, that's amazing. All right, so my next question is a personal question for you, if you don't mind. I can tell that I can tell that you're passionate about this. You talk very specifically about it, and it comes out in how you talk that this is something you love to do. So, what kind of fulfillment are you finding from this type of work? I mean, how when you step back and you say, this project or this company or this client was a success, what does that look like?
Well, for me, it's a mission. It's not a job. It's like, if I don't do this now, I just see a whole bunch of companies going over a cliff very, very soon. And, when the census came out in 2015, and I said to myself, by 2030, 15 years is not a lot of time to develop leaders. And then the pandemic hit shortly thereafter, and a whole bunch of boomers left. And we hit that wall a whole lot sooner than I thought we were going to. So we have a big problem now. Yeah. So what success looks like in the end is a CEO, owner, founder who can, ride out into the sunset on their white horse, happily knowing that their legacy is still intact. And that could be employee stock option, make it an employee-owned company. That could be just continues on, with my first client who just promoted internal people who'd been there for 20 years, or that could be selling to a competitor. Because in the construction industry, it's really consolidating right now. It's like publishing did and accounting did a few, decades ago now, I guess. But there's a lot of big companies, not a lot. There's a few big companies out there who are buying up a lot of the regional ones. Yeah. And that's fine if that's how you want to exit your company, but you still need a leadership team because they're not bringing people in. They just want your territory.
That's right.
So, and I'm not that kind of advisor. I'm not like, how do you want to end your career? I'm more like, if you choose to keep the legacy going internally, then I'm your person to help you figure out how to get your, I don't want to say underlings, but the next level prepared. And I'll say another thing that most people don't think about. It's like an aha moment for everybody. One of the first things I'll say in my workshop when I work with people is, or one of the exercises we do is I say, write down 3 people who could be your successor on an index card. This is a great exercise anybody can do. And generally, they can't even come up with 3. So that's problem number 1, because if you only have 1 successor, it's as good as having no successors, because you just have no idea what's going to happen to that one person or what their choice will be, right? The second problem that most companies have is a lack of depth as well. They only say, well, who's going to replace me? And they don't think about who's next and who's next. So at a minimum, for every C-level position, you ought to have 3 successors in mind, like Jack Welch did at the end. Replaced him, and they all knew it, and they're all in the running for like 6 years. So you want to replace CEO level or C level, you want at least 3 people in the pipeline. Beneath that, you want at least 9 people who are going to come up potentially to replace those 3. And beneath that, you want like 15. So we're talking generations. We're talking your Gen Xers, your millennials, and your Gen Zers. And I know people think, why am I getting a Gen Z or like a 20-year-old ready for a leadership position? Because that's how long it takes for them to understand the business, the industry, the interpersonal skills that they need. And they also still have to do their job and get all their technical certifications. So, I mean, it's a long process. And you don't want to say to somebody at 45, hey, you want this job? I know I haven't prepared you for it, but we'd like you to take this job now.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, when you put it like that and you think about how deep it actually goes. So I planned on that being my last question, but I have one more for you. I have one more for you because I'm curious as I'm hearing you talking, and you said it right. In the construction industry, in these industries, typically boomers are the ones that, you know, are going to be stepping away, and Gen Zers are coming into these industries, which we all know it's been difficult to recruit, you know, in that age group specifically into these industries.
The trades, yeah.
Yeah. So what's the dynamic in the generational gap between a boomer and a Gen Z? Does that make this leadership development piece more difficult, being able to communicate with one another? No,
it makes it a whole lot easier.
Really? How?
Yes. So I'll put a plug for myself. If you go to my LinkedIn profile and there's like a featured section where you can pin things. I did a live stream about not even a year ago. It's called Gen Z, you know, welcome to your new employees or something. And it'll tell you everything you need to know about what motivates them. And the reason it makes it easier is because, well, here's a couple of things. Gen Z wants the security. We talked about that, right? So they want to know the career paths. They want to know that they have a financial security. Gen Z also does not believe in a leader because that generation is all about equality and equity. And so why would we have one leader? Why do we need one person in charge of everybody? That seems ridiculous. So it makes it easier because you want to develop all of their leadership skills. I won't say that they all want them, but they're going to all need them because they don't respect hierarchy. So in that sense, it is harder because they see their boss as really just a more experienced peer. And in the construction industry, that is not how it works. In the construction industry, it's like the military. There's a hierarchy. You pay your dues. You wait your turn. So that psychological part is hard to overcome. But if you do it my way, which is developing everybody's leadership skills, it actually becomes much easier because younger people want those capabilities. Like you said, your folks were like eating it up going, oh my gosh, why didn't I get this any earlier? Or why haven't we had this before? Young people want that out of the gate. What is going to make me successful? How can I have a career here? I want to learn. That's another thing about Gen Z. They love the virtual learning because they got forced into it. So that's good because a lot of things are available on e-learning. But my point of earlier is you can have them do a LinkedIn course or something from your professional association, but you've got to debrief it afterwards. You can't just say, cool, you went to the class and now you know it, because they don't. You have to say to them, so have you seen this in action? Does your boss do this? What would happen if your boss did do this? How would you react to this situation? You have to bring it to life.
Yeah. Wow. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I could talk to you for 3 more hours, but unfortunately this is not the Joe Rogan podcast, and neither of us have that kind of time. So no, I really do appreciate all of this information. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to leave our listeners with before we say our goodbyes and I ask where people can find you?
No. So what you didn't ask before I covered, which is where do you start? But what I didn't finish talking about was this exercise that anybody can do. Okay. So get an index card, get your C group together, have everybody write at least 3 names down. Number 1 will be them going, I can't come up with 3 names. So that's, right there. We have a weak link. We've got to figure out if there's anybody else around us in this company already that we can start developing. The second part of that exercise is after they have 3 names written on their index card, they pass it to the next person on their right, and they keep passing it around. And as the new person who receives that index card, they put a check next to the person that they think would be the best choice. And we're not going to narrow it down. I just want to know who you think would be the best choice, because then we're going to analyze what does that person have that the others don't, so that we can kind of start replicating them. But the other aha moment that always occurs is the next person in line will go, I don't know any of these people, so I can't pick one. And that's on you, right? Yeah. That's you not being a sponsor. That's you not being a champion. That's you not giving people underneath you visibility in the organization, so that the company can be confident you're developing your future leaders.
Wow, that's interesting. You do that exercise with all your clients, like right out the gate?
Yes.
Wow, right man, I bet it's mind blowing.
It is mind blowing.
Wow.
It's very interesting, because in the workshop that I run, the 2-day workshop, I'll just throw out a question and then I'll just stand back, because these are conversations nobody's had. And I don't have the answers. I just need you guys to come to the answers so that I can, create the development plan. So, yeah, there's tons of mind-blowing conversations where they're just like, oh, I never thought about that.
Wow, that's amazing. Nanette, where can people find you if they want to learn more about this and what you do?
So I said earlier, you can find me on LinkedIn. My tagline or whatever there is DRMINER, Dr. Miner. Or to Training Doctor. The website is trainingdr, as in doctor.com.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us today. I know that my listeners are going to glean a ton of insight from this, and hopefully they were taking notes. If they weren't, stop what you're doing, go back, write this down. But Nanette, thanks again so much.
Thank you so much, Josh. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.